Hello, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 62. This is our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. I almost forgot. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in Southern California, and I'm coming to you with an average of 500 to 700 milliseconds of latency, as always.
I wonder what it is. You're Wi-Fi, though, right?
I'm on Wi-Fi, and who knows, maybe my PS4 is downloading some giant update without telling me or something like that.
That wouldn't be a surprise. PS4s are known for that. Oh, there goes the latency. Vince, how you doing?
Oh, I am doing all right. Broadcasting to you from that game company, as always. Although on my new computer, my Microsoft Surface 3, which is seeming to be okay right now, just okay. It's only a few hours, so if anything happens to me, I blame this computer. I'm trying my best to drive this new machine.
That's cool, man. You got Cubase, Sonar's all installed on there?
No, not Sonar. Haven't tried any of the music making stuff. I've got SoundForge on there, and just some real basic stuff. I've actually been mostly testing out some games, and it's kind of amazing to have, a tablet that is, 1 to 1.5 pounds running a proper 3D game. I've mostly been messing around with Street Fighter 4 because I'm a fighting game dork, but it runs on the machine. It's amazing the times that we live in now.
That's pretty cool. What games are you playing lately? You know what we do for a living, and I don't think I've ever asked the question to you guys. What games are you playing right now?
Ooh, games. I haven't been playing any new games lately. A lot of the games that I'm currently playing are things that are anywhere from a few months to maybe even a few years old. The game that I'm spending a lot of time on consistently is Ace Combat Infinity, which is a free-to-play combat flight sim. And I'm just a sucker for any sort of flight sim games. It's kind of a niche there, and the fact that this has a community there, and a really ardent one at that's gotten me pumping. So I'm glad to play that. Playing some cute little handheld games here and there. I play my Candy Crush. I play my Tsum Tsum, and cute puzzle games on my phone, but actually not too much in terms of the big AAA, the big console games lately.
Mike, what about you?
I'm still making my way through Dragon Age Inquisition, which is a lot of fun. And I always get pulled back like a mobster who can't quite quit the mob. I keep coming back to Civ 5 every now and then and just get painfully engrossed. I'm kind of arrested development at the second expansion. I didn't get the most recent expansion. I guess there's 3 of them. I'm stuck there. I haven't moved forward. But when I'm not doing Dragon Age, I go into these vortex of obsession with Civilization and then re-emerge for air and go back to what should be my main gaming experience.
Now, given that I'm a Civ nut as well, and I understand how many hours that will suck up of your time, what are your ideal hours for Civ play?
Ideally, I think at this point never, because it just takes up too much time. It's really dangerous to do it in an evening when I've kind of done all my work for the day, because it can just chew up the entire evening. And so I guess maybe a third as many as I do is the real answer to that question.
What about you, Vince? Do you have any kind of specific game hours that work for you?
Not really. Actually, lately, I'll do a little bit at night before I head to sleep. Midnight to 1 o'clock. I'll try to get a little bit of time in. Often I'll spend that time actually just sitting on the PlayStation Network store and downloading random stuff, or I think I spend almost as much time trawling for games that I inevitably don't play as I do actually playing the games. But yeah, usually late at night. What about your games, Kyle?
Oh my goodness. The game I'm playing the most is the one that I'm working on. Constantly playing that. But it's the typical.
Yeah.
It's the typical problem that if you make games, you don't really have a lot of time to play games, sadly. And when I'm not making games, right, just like you guys, I'm researching software, trying out some new kind of new piece of sound design equipment or something like that, and that really gets most of my time. Speaking of which, shall we segue over to a new piece of software that Mike Shapiro has been checking out?
I have, but that was a very artful segue. I saw that coming, and it was smooth and elegant, and it gives everyone a chance to transition. What I thought I'd talk a little bit about today is Signal, which is the new virtual instrument from Output Sounds. This is just a first impressions. I really haven't looked at the manual. I haven't really dug into this software. I just installed it this morning. But I'm kind of excited about it, so I thought it'd be worth sharing some of that excitement with you and our audience. So Signal is the second virtual instrument from Output Sounds. By the way, these are terrible names because they're just ungoogleable. If you ever try searching for that, you have to just type entire descriptive sentences like Output, the company that makes virtual instruments, or something like that. So minor rebuke to the makers of these products, but only a minor rebuke because the actual plugins they make are great. Signal's the second one. Rev was the first, and I think a lot of us really dig Rev and found it really useful in a number of ways. So Signal's the follow-up, and it's basically, it describes itself as a pulse engine, which means that it offers lots and lots of sampled and synthesized sounds that have some element of motion to them, some kind of rhythmic pulsation, something that snaps to the tempo of your DAW and will provide that kind of motion and energy to whatever you're working on. And I think there's something like 500 sounds right out in the 2 expansion packs, which they are currently giving away for free. So there's a lot of stuff, and I think I've tried out like 20 or 30 of these. So this is a very preliminary impression, but it seems really cool. The sounds seem to blend between organic and very synthy, and sometimes the two of them are blended together. The stuff in Rev was very organic. It sounded like processed acoustical sources, and Signal is similar, but I feel like there's more actual synthesized timbres in there as well, a lot of buzzy sawtooth waves, stuff like that. Some of them seem to be low pedals, others they're more harmonically based, they're good for chords, and a couple that I found are arpeggiators, where you basically play a chord, you hold down the keys on your keyboard that are the chord factors of some harmony, and it basically writes a cue for you. It just kind of like arpeggiates among all the notes of the chord. You could just kind of sit back or lay a brick on your keyboard and go get a drink and come back, and the cue is done by the time you get back. It's really cool. And some may be more fun to play with than useful, but many of them strike me as very useful. For me, the ones that are a little more subtle and less complete, I think, are more interesting, where you have kind of like a subtle pulsation rather than this gargantuan sound that fills up the entire sonic spectrum. But there's plenty of both. So it looks like it'd be very useful for game composers, particularly people who are doing contemporary games, hybrid orchestral contemporary, or things that are just full-on electronic. I think this would do a lot of the dirty work for you. And for film composers as well, I think it would be useful if you're doing kind of a Thomas Newmanian rhythmic minimalism. I think some of the sounds that are a little more subtle and organic could be really useful for that sort of stuff. What else? Wow. Configurability. This is something that I liked at first glance. It looks like they give you a couple of sliders on the screen that let you play with the parameters of the sound, and the sliders change what they do from sound to sound. So sometimes it'll say like bright versus dull, or noisy versus pleasant, or whatever else. It's a contextually changing parameter, and I think it looks very handy. Much like the way Rev would give you just enough knobs to be interesting, but not so many that you felt you were overwhelmed. This seems to have been designed with a similar philosophy. There's enough for you to dig into and customize the sounds, but your eyes aren't swimming from too many controls that are on the screen at once. What else? One other cool thing is that each sound has a textual synopsis, like kind of a byline, or I guess I should say a tagline, that gives you a quick rundown of what the sound is like, just verbally, and a couple of tips for usage. So you might load up a sound, it'll say this is a grindy kind of sawtooth. Why don't you try dial number 3 if you want a lighter sound, and pull it back if you want something a little darker. You know, like a little bullet caption of a description for each sound. And I actually find that really handy. And with a lot of my libraries, I find myself opening up like an Omni Outliner file or a text file and typing in those little descriptions for myself. So when I need something that's amorphous or more aggressive, I just go to my little list and say, hey, check out this sound. It's good for that. And it seems like they do some of that work for you. They at least give you, you don't have to sit there playing it all over the keyboard to kind of remember what the sound is. And for something with this many patches, I think that could be really handy. So first impression is overwhelmingly good, and I think if you're a game composer or someone whose work is minimalist or rhythmic, or a sound designer who wants to try some interesting moving timbres, this is well worth the cost. So those are my first impressions.
Nice. Vince, you got anything?
Wow.
I'm
just still overwhelmed by when you said you just sort of lay a fat chord on the keyboard, grab a drink, come back a minute later, and see that your cue is done. How serious are you when you say that?
I'm semi-serious.
Wow.
There's a couple of sounds that I've found after just a cursory playing around with the thing. You just breaking out of the imaginary wrapping, and you just start loading random sounds with cool names and start playing. And a few of them, the text description said, yeah, just try holding down a chord. And I did. And there was this amazing arpeggiation with fairly rich timbre. And it kind of felt like if you just needed a texture for a moment, you're done. You just start and stop at the appropriate point. In a way, it reminds me of the early to mid-'90s when the Rompler boxes were starting to give loops as opposed to just individual sounds. You'd get like a Korg wave station, and you'd hold down middle C, and there would be some kind of rhythmic loop, and you'd have something that was fairly complete. And a lot of TV composers who were under brutal deadlines would just say, yeah, I'll hold down middle C for a minute, and then maybe jam on a separate track on top of that, and then I'm done. And there was a kind of danger of these stock-sounding cues that were so easy to produce. In defense of Signal, it offers you so many sounds, and they're so configurable that I don't think we'll have that problem. But I do think this is a tool that could allow someone who didn't quite know what they were doing to come up with something that sounded pretty cool. Much like GarageBand or really any looping facility can kind of enable, it lowers the artistic barriers to entry so that you can do something that sounds like music with minimal effort. So there is an element of truth to that quip that I made.
Wow.
Now, did this replace anything that you already had that was doing that kind of work? That kind of pulsating sounds that you were leaning on? Is there software you were already leaning on for that?
I would usually just take an individual sound and then load up, was it Loop Designer in Logic or Delay Designer? And I would try to make my own equivalent of that. So I would tap out a rhythm more often than rely on a pre-baked rhythm. But I'm not someone like Alex who does a lot of electronically driven scores, so he might, or Vince for that matter, may have a more interesting answer to that.
Wow.
I use Rev a lot, and I wasn't sure I was going to use it at the beginning, so I was wondering if this was going to have that same effect on me, which I'm going to be picking up here in the next couple of days. But the more I spent time with Rev, the more I started using it. I think it's one of the best whooshes that you can get is coming from Rev and all the different materials that they're using behind the scenes for that. And so when I was thinking about a pulse engine, I started to think from a sound design perspective. I'm not sure how typically a pulse for me is some sort of whoosh that has a tail, just comes in and then goes out. But as I started listening to their demos and I watched their long video on how they were doing it, all the control that they're offering through this software for pulses really, really got me going. Anyway, I won't go into detail because I haven't actually put it under my fingers yet where Mike has. But I'm pretty excited to use it. And I just wanted to say that for those people like me, and I know there were a lot of us who thought that Rev, what do I need a library of a bunch of reverses for? I think it's been long enough now that we realize that that's a fantastic piece of software and it's very useful. And so if there's any doubt about what you need pulses for, I think that should be gone, given the proof that Rev has given us.
Yeah, I guess I should go and get that bundle that they have there of Rev and Signal for $350, huh?
Really, that's a great deal.
Yeah, the way that you guys talk about it, I'm just thinking, wow. I need another package to install on my computer. Huh? I gotta find some more hard drive space somewhere.
That's thanks, Mike, for covering that, and I guess we'll cover it in more depth in the future when we all get our hands on it, because I'm curious where Mike's going to go with it from a compositional standpoint, where Vince is going to go with it from a compositional and sound design standpoint, and what I can do with it from a sound design standpoint. And then that's pretty much it, because Alex is not going to use it because he makes this stuff himself. If Alex is listening, he's unfortunately not with us today because he is working hard on another project, I guess you could say, but he'll be back next week, I think. But this kind of reminded me of another topic that I was going to move on to, unless you guys got more about the output sound stuff.
Take it away.
Well, Vince and I were talking in the green room about, and the same question applies in a compositional point of view for you, Mike, is I have a process that I use for sound design, and when I bring up my template in Ableton, it's already preloaded with a bunch of instruments that I lean on. And in addition to that, I also use Iced Audio's Audio Finder for keeping track of my library. And between the two of them, I make sounds. And I've been doing it the same way for so long that I wanted to kind of break myself of the habit. And so I kind of went basic on it, and I went back to Google, and I just typed in how to make sound designs. And what I realized when I did that Google search, the results weren't as disparate as I hoped they would be. A lot of people are doing the same things the same way. And I wanted to kind of break that mold. Vince and I were talking about a library that he's rediscovered, or maybe not rediscovered is the right word, but because they put out a dot update, he's got that update and it kind of opened it up in his world again. And Vince, would you talk more about that? Because it made me think of maybe using Chromaphone, which I have and I've never used, to try to do some new ideas for sound design with. But the question is basically, do you go back and have you gone back and broken yourself from your templates to find these old instruments and these old processes that you purchased or that you have sitting dormant somewhere and brought them back into your world so that you can do some new stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when I think I mentioned before that the first ever orchestra library that I ever got was Miroslav, back when, this was the old Akai library. It was on however many CDs, and it's nothing like the technology that was coming up at the time. Giga Studio was sort of the big thing in the early 2000s, and so I could get this Akai library for really cheap. And all those samples that are there, they're some really nice samples, but you couldn't really do anything with those samples, at least not without kind of a ludicrous amount of work. And then I actually got my first orchestra plugin, which was this thing called Sinful Orchestra, SYN, Sinful Orchestra. And that was kind of amazing because it's this thing that's not sampled. The whole library is, 30, 50 megabytes for what purports to be a whole orchestra.
Wow.
And it does this mix of physical modeling and phrase reconstruction and all these buzzwords. But the big thing about it is that you had so much control over the sound that you were getting out of it. I could make my individual violin sound like something that was not a violin at all. And I could make my flute sound just absolutely totally crazy. And besides using it for creating really expressive types of music that were okay when it came to recreating the orchestra sound that we all know and love, they could create some really fantastic stuff. And I would actually use Sinful Orchestra to do weird, wacky sound design where, nowadays I have other tools for things for, pads and swells and crazy ambient noises and stuff like that. This library, this plugin is now about 10 years old, and I was really surprised and actually delighted to see that the developer just put out an update from 2.5 to 2.6, along with some other things, a new website. And so I've actually been trying to tell more people about it, because there's something about these libraries that give you so much control and allow you to actually really master it. There's so many sliders, so many things that you could assign CCs to. As you learn more and more about what to do with these different sliders, you find yourself doing newer, different, better, cooler, more awesome things. I thought that I had actually got this plugin really mastered back around 2009, 2010, which was the last big project where I really went all out using this plugin. And now I'm going back to it and using some of the skills that I've picked up in the last half decade, and found that, wait, this thing can actually give me a whole lot more, both when it comes to recreating the orchestra as well as going back and creating really wacky sounds. What can I do with these cellos if I totally mess with this harmonic parity slider, and then I'm going to put the bow noise all the way up, and then I'm going to totally change how I'm going to use a CC for the orchestra tuning on this. And then you could do different wacky things. And it's been really fun to rediscover this old plugin that I've got.
That's a great point too. The more we learn, the more we apply to the tools that we're used to using, the better they get. Have you had a tool that kind of ran out on you, that it kind of capped out, and you wanted it to do more, but it couldn't anymore? Well, maybe we shouldn't mention that here.
Well, I actually kind of like Miroslav. Miroslav, they're just wonderful sounds. The orchestra is beautifully recorded, but those sounds were really made for the old school samplers of the early 90s, and you couldn't really do that much with them. You have this pristine sound of a note that's being played, and you can really work that and place it really properly in the music. But if you wanted to mold it more than that, it's really tough to do that. I hit my ceiling very quickly with Miroslav. But going back to Sinful, which on the face of it doesn't sound quite as good as those Miroslav orchestra, if you hit a note with either of the plugins, or the Sinful plugin versus the Miroslav library, that Miroslav library will give you the just beautiful sound of oboe on a high C, and Sinful, it will give you the most blah sound ever. But you add your CCs in there, and you work with the trim on the release, and you work with the envelope of the expression, and you put all this stuff in there. It will just keep on giving you more, and Miroslav just sort of it really quickly hits its ceiling. But hey, there's a reason why Miroslav is, well, what it's going on 20 years now, right?
Oh, I thought you were
going to say years.
Price. Yeah, it is long in the tooth, as they say.
Yeah.
Matt Uhlman is in the chat room, and he was saying that what he's been going back to is just old instruments, which really sparks a chord with me, because every time I buy a guitar or something, I write like 4 songs on that thing on average, I would say. Just there's something very inspirational about a new piece of instrument, a new piece of hard wood, But with software, I don't do the same thing. Do you guys have that similarity, or does a new piece of software inspire you to kind of really create something brand new?
Certainly, if a plugin has a sound that is kind of new to my palette, there's a temptation to just start using it for the novelty of it. And so for one example, Sonic Couture had some, I think it's called pan drums, which was a number of instruments that are kind of like steel drums, tongue drums, and things like that. And it's a really neat sound. It's very, call it like niche sound. You don't often need to have kind of tonal steel drums in your music. But when I got it, I just wanted to use it at every opportunity. And that's dangerous because the number of your clients who actually want to hear that are few and far between. It's very much a special occasion sound. So there can be a danger. It's like shopping for groceries when you're hungry. There can be a danger when you just opened up a new plugin and the novelty is exciting to you. So yes, is the answer, the short answer to your question, and it's a dangerous phenomenon.
That is a true point. That is a true point. I don't end up usually writing something, but I do end up losing a lot of time. But this goes back to what I'm saying is I have these softwares that I've purchased, and I'll mention a couple here that were just sitting dormant. Hybrid Tools by 8DO, Zero G's Deep Impact, Odyssey, and Alien Skies. And I was going through this today. Chromaphone's another one. And I started adding those into my DAW template for sound design just so I can remember that they exist. Because as I was digging through those today, I'm working on spell sounds right now. And the client smartly said, you're kind of leaving the background out. Like you've got the spell happening, but there's this whole kind of creepiness to the actual casting of the spell that's missing from your sound designs. And so it sent me on this course to figure out where I have a bunch of really cool, nobody's ever heard before backgrounds that I can morph or manipulate. You know, that they can start from a sample and I can start layering and doing things too. And Geosonics is another one, which I actually bought recently, but I've not been using it. And it's funny because some of these spell sounds are elemental, you know, like some ice sound or a fire sound. Why wouldn't I be at Geosonics looking for that kind of thing? Because it doesn't come to my mind. So I stuck all of these in my DAW, and it promptly crashed because I put too much stuff in there. So now I'm having to make choices, which is very frustrating. But I just found it fascinating that I'm paying the money, I'm listening to the demos, I'm paying the money, I'm messing with them for 30 minutes when I get it to an hour, maybe longer than that, maybe 2 hours, and it sticks with me, and just the essence of it just starts to fade. And then as I get into a project, I immediately go to the old standbys that I've always used. I need to break that. As far as software is concerned, I have no problem when it's like field recording. I mean, just today I bought, oh, they're not here. In Canada, there's a candy called Smarties. It's like M&M's, but it's got a fruit covering on it. And they have a case for it that's octagonal and long. And when you pop the case, it's got a cool sound. And when you put the lid back on, it snaps so beautifully like a clink of a button. It's like the perfect button sound. So I do stuff like that all the time. I find this thing and I go, oh my God, I got to record that sound so that I can use that for buttons. And I do that all the time. But if I buy a software library, it usually just sits, sometimes it just sits dormant, except for a few that I've really clung on to. So I'm trying to break that habit, and I want you guys to give me some amazing references and amazing suggestions that will break it and make me hugely successful.
Oh, man. Well, you've got to use Chromaphone if you're not using it.
I'm not. I need to.
Well, I don't know. All those AAS stuff, so they make Tasman and Chromaphone and String Studio. They're really big on all the physical modeling stuff, and I just think that they're just wonderful for all sorts of sound design. Like right now, I'm actually using Chromaphone not just for percussive and material sorts of hits and different types of stuff there. I've actually been using the noise generator on there in order to make really long loops of different sorts of scrapes and scratches, and it's really cool. I just love Chromaphone, and I actually really like all their other stuff too. That's maybe perhaps a little less regarded. I think people don't really like the String Studio too much. I know people are not very fond of their physical modeled guitar stuff, but still, the amount of control that you have over there is just fantastic. And if you keep on working it it will keep on giving you new stuff and new sounds. It's just such fun. I find it really fun to actually work in the environments they give me.
And I have so much AAS stuff from Tasman to UA to Chromaphone, and you're right, they're fantastic. And as an Ableton user, they wrote so many of the fundamental instruments that Ableton is packaging with their software. Great company, great stuff right there. Absolutely, I agree. Oh, Mike, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to ask if you could just give a quick descriptor of what Chromaphone is to members of our audience who may not have heard of it.
Ooh, let me bring up a screenshot. Let's do something fancy. Hold on.
Okay.
Come up, or I should say a screen share. I should probably hide contact because it'll be in the way. Give me just a second. Vince, do you want to kind of explain?
Sure.
Then I'll show the screen share.
Well, let's see. Chromaphone is a physical modeling instrument, which is ridiculously cool. Let me just do this, and it came out, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and the idea is you have different sorts of materials, and you can define the property of those materials, your resonators, and you could have 1 or 2 resonators, and they can be connected to each other, and so it'd be things like, oh, I want a closed metal tube, and I'm going to have that coupled with a wooden block, and then I'm going to hit it with a mallet, and that mallet is going to be so stiff or not as stiff. And you have all these different properties that you can mess with, but you can create just all these different types of cool percussive sounds by messing with the properties of these different resonators and messing with mallets or noise generators, and it's just such fun. You know, a lot of the stuff that they give you will be your, you know, stuff like marimbas and xylophones, but then they also have things where, oh, if you use the noise generator and then you use these resonators, you can actually have like a really cool, awesome sweep or a cool harmonic pad and things like that. And it's just fun to explore the space. Admittedly, they do make it a little less fun because you actually have to go through the DAW as opposed to through the plugin itself if you want to do CC mapping outside of the stuff that they build in there with, you know, the mod wheel and whatnot. But if you're willing to do that, you know, mapping your CCs through the DAW, you can do just some amazing stuff there, not just for sound design, but also for cool live performance too. It's just really cool.
Yeah, I agree. When I was playing with it, it was super fun. It is a physical modeling engine, and to my ear, that isn't as true sometimes. You know, so I've had to mess with it a lot to get sounds out of it that felt realistic to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I am probably of the minority when it comes to that. I'm going to dig in even deeper. But what I was showing here is that there's all
right though.
Pardon?
You know, in terms of the realistic stuff, yeah, you know, they have the marimbas and xylophones and cymbals and stuff like that. You know, you can make those, and actually some of their drums actually sound pretty good. Like, you know, they have a really good steel drum in there. They have really good toms and snares, but you know, we've got all these fantastic recordings of, you know, all the percussion that we want. You know, we've sort of got that figured out.
Yeah.
You know, the sampling world knows how to sample a drum kit or a piano or a xylophone, but being able to, you know, have that malleability at your fingertips for, oh, I want a marimba, but I'm going to start from that marimba and take it somewhere in a totally different direction.
Gotcha. I see your point. That's
what's great.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
How practical is this from the standpoint of production? Do you find yourself using it in projects, or is it more fun to play with?
Well, let's see. For music, I don't use it that much for my music production. I use it a hell of a lot for sound design. There's a lot of sound design that I've done recently where I've got some Chromaphone, I've got some Absinthe, and boom, that's a whole hell of a lot of stuff that I've got there. And and a lot of guys love the stuff that I do with that particular combo.
Nice.
What about you, Kyle?
Well, like I said, I've had it a while, and I messed with it for a little bit. Maybe my mindset was, well, here's what I took away from it: is it was super cool, but I wasn't immediately impressed with the sound, so therefore I didn't dig in deep enough, which is the mistake it sounds like I made. I approached it from a realistic sound perspective rather than I can edit the heck out of some sounds and make my own thing, which is obviously what it's here for. But yeah, I need to revisit this. I can see so many interesting little drop downs I have here, like how many voices do you want this sound to have? That's fantastic to add to the realism right there. I like that you tap on this area and you can select whether you want a string to go through a plate or to send it through a membrane. What would a string sound like? As a matter of fact, I just had a banjo ukulele repaired, which is basically strings over a membrane. So I can, right here maybe I could start creating some really interesting things that my banjo ukulele won't do. Yeah. And of course, I always walk through as many of the presets as I have time for, and here's soundscapes and textures and outer reaches, eerie stuff. It's got your typical things. Maybe by reverse engineering, you can see it. You can see how people are making sounds. Maybe we could apply this somewhere else. We could say, I'm going to go record some notes from a marimba, and I'm going to run them through a convolution reverb that's based off some strings, and see if I come up with the same kind of texture that they've come up with here. You could really use this also as an educational tool. So I'm really impressed. I need to revisit it. I didn't give it a fair shake.
Yeah, there's some really cool things. The noise generator, which is on the left side, that's really important. But also the right side, that balance slider. It looks so innocuous there. But
right here.
Yeah, I mean, basically, when you have two resonators, you can turn off the coupling. So you're basically striking the two resonators, and it's like, parallel voice. But you could also couple them, and you can change the balance of where the energy is going to. Is it mostly the marimba and it's being translated over to the string? Is it the string and it's translating over to the marimba, or is it some other ratio? That creates some really, really cool stuff, and it can be a really subtle change in sound depending on the combo you've got there, or it could be just totally different, and you actually use that as in my DAW, I would just have a CC actually mapped to the balance, so that as I'm playing different stuff, or as I've got the noise generator on, I'm actually continuously changing the balance. And that's not something you can easily do with any sort of physical contraption, no matter how intricate it might be.
That is so true, and a very good point. And then, of course, you have all the typical effects down here at the bottom.
Yeah.
What do they got?
They're pretty good sounding too.
What'd you say?
They're pretty good sounding too. The built-in reverb's actually pretty decent sounding.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's a great one. I'll shut that down now. That's a great point. I need to get in there and start messing with that. But as Matt Uhlman has said in the chat room, I tend to go to a source. He mentioned pedal steel, which, Mike, I don't think I ever pulled out while you were up here, and that would have been good. Man, that's a fun instrument to play right there. You guys ever messed with any?
I love pedal steel.
Well, I guess what
I'm a horrible guitarist, but...
Oh, sorry.
No, I love the sound, that's all.
I need to pull that out and start doing some experiments with it. That's a great point. So what other things have you got in your library? When I think about my contact, I'm trying to think of the items that I added to my Ableton template right now. There's just so many. I mean, I've got a bunch of Embertone stuff that I never really look at. Hollow Sun is another one if you get a chance. Hollow Sun is already kind of like pre-designed sounds, though.
So this is actually kind of interesting. So I do have a template that I use for music, and usually I will design the templates at the beginning of the project and maybe add on to it as the project goes on. But
Nice.
that's just for music. I never have a sound design template. I'm always just, okay, I start a new project and it's blank, and then okay, even stuff like Absinthe and Reactor, which I use 90% of the time. I'm constantly using Absinthe. Even that's not necessarily in a template. I always go through the motion of, okay, I want this, and let me play around with this. I also never have to worry about running out of memory or having to, you know, spend some time going to the coffee shop while I wait for a project to load because of a really big sound design template. But I think that actually helps. Sometimes having a template can actually be a hindrance when it comes to trying to get something new out of you.
Yeah. We have too many options. We've said that on the show too many times, huh?
I have a couple of. Sometimes I'll make a micro template when I want to do a quick and dirty sketch, just something that is not encumbered by tons and tons of sounds, and it's like a piano and a couple of pads and something. And I find it's important not to put too much time between your creative inspiration and sitting down and trying to embody it in some way. So templates are great, except when they're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Somebody called me the Simon Cowell of our show, so I'm going to go with that for a minute. And Spectrasonics just released a new second version of their primary library that you hear in every game. And I was disappointed in the Twitterverse at how many popular composers and sound designers went, oh my God, I got to get it. And I thought, how many of you people are dependent upon this Spectrasonics?
I've never used Spectrasonics. I mean, I know everyone's like, hey, you got to get Omnisphere, or you got to get...
That's what I'm talking about. Omnisphere
like,
2 just came out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds cool. I listen to all the stuff that you can do with it. I feel like I've already got I've got a big amount of overlap of what it's capable with all of my stuff. And granted, it's not all in a single library, but I don't need for it to all be in a single library. Hey, I've got all this stuff here. I'm gonna try to keep on mastering that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that it's doing something that you can't get somewhere else. I mean, I love. There's so many Sample Logic stuff. Those guys are fantastic, and they're putting out stuff that obviously competes with Omnisphere. But I was just disappointed. I will honestly say, go on air as saying I was disappointed to see the list of popular names that freaked out and ran out and got number 2. And I thought, are they getting it just because they have the ability to get it, or are they getting it because they depend upon it? And if they depend upon it, then that would explain why we're hearing a lot of similar sounds in games. A lot of crossover there. It was great when we had Watson Wu on. He's recording guns and cars, and in some ways, cars have a lot of difference, but guns do not. An M16 is going to sound like maybe an AK-47 a little bit, to a game. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I'm sounding ignorant right now, but it just seems that you could take an M16 sound and make it sound like an AK-47 or reverse that, but somehow Watson Wu is digging in and making sure that those things are different. And that I have a lot of respect for, rather than just leaning on a typical sound and having it show up in the game. Is the M16 from Call of Duty any different than the M16 from Battlefield? It could be. It should be, so that it has some sort of DNA that relates to the game.
I think we're going to get a lot of
Watson was
angry.
Sorry. I mean, Watson was sort of hinting at that when he was talking about it, how he was, besides the weapon, he thought it was actually really important to categorize by the actual aspects of the weapon. The name is just a signifier, but what's really important is, okay, I'm firing, 7.62 millimeter. That's important. And I'm going to use this, and I'm going to care about this space. I'm going to care about this perspective, and all those aspects, and not just that name, not just that signifier.
Which is why I would say get the Watson Wu libraries above all else, because when I look at my plethora of weapon sounds that I have in my library, a lot of them sound the same. I can't tell the difference. Yet with Watson's, I can tell. You know, like he's talking about shooting it over a lake so he gets a long tail on the reverb. Rather than you can tell that artificially some of the libraries have added that tail. I think that's really cool. You've got that kind of. He's kind of like putting bread and butter together, where I kind of feel like a lot of the libraries aren't. And so therefore, people are leaning on sounds that are popular and not necessarily differentiating their game from any other. And is that what we need to do as a composer and as a sound designer? Should we be targeting the game that we're working on to have its own audio DNA so that it stands out or that it differentiates itself from other games in the same genre?
I think where the opportunities for creative differentiation happen in game audio, and now I'm just talking sound design rather than music, come in how the sound is parameterized according to what's going on in gameplay. So we're probably familiar with the phenomenon where if you're firing a gun and you're doing really well, the gun gets louder, or if you're about to die, the enemy's guns get louder, sort of psycho-acoustic phenomena like that are half based in acoustic reality and half based in the drama of the game. I think, or when you decide to put in echoes, you know, whether or not reverb in a room is acoustically justified, what kind of ambience you put in there for what kind of dramatic effect. I think even if every game in the world used the same M16 sound source, you could have a lot of different interesting spins on mood and sonic connotation, I think, depending on how the audio is implemented.
You know, I wanted to give a fair shake to Omnisphere. Matt Uelman is saying that it's his default synth thing. Very powerful and deep. And I don't own a copy, so I will admittedly say that my opinion is uneducated. I was just referencing that it seems awfully popular, and I tend maybe to root for the underdog in those circumstances and kind of go off the beaten path and try to find something new. But if something is really good at something, I'll be the first to eat my hat and admit it.
Thanks, Kyle. That was directly related to my little speech. I appreciate it.
Sorry, Mike.
No, don't mind me. I'm just getting on a soapbox and giving a little moment of philosophy, but please go ahead. Back to the subject of 5 minutes ago.
You are absolutely right, Mike, and I apologize for stepping on that. Everybody, roll the tape back here for a minute. Listen to me. Roll the digital thing that you're watching this through back 5 minutes and listen to what Mike said. It's very important.
No, there's a moment. It's gone. Actually, one thing that's interesting with Omnisphere is I think it was the SCL did a talk with all the World of Warcraft music guys. The whole team was up there, Russell Brower and the rest. And I think at one point someone said, "What are your go-to tools?" And every one of them said Omnisphere. To the last man, I'm pretty sure it was. So clearly it's found a place in the arsenal of people who really have to produce a lot of music in a short period of time with a huge discriminating audience. That said, I've never used it myself.
Yeah, and you said a key word, I think: limited amount of time. Yeah. Okay, so there's my Simon Cowell. You're welcome. Everybody, send your hate mail to Kyle Johnson at shubidywham.com. That totally exists. I swear to God. Please send it there. There's a lyric from a band that I'm about to see Saturday that I love called the Waterboys. Have you guys ever heard of the Waterboys?
Not me.
I'll take the deafening silence as a no. Anyway, they're coming to Ventura, and I'm going to check them out on Saturday. It'd be my first time seeing them. And they have a song where they say, the lyric says, "I keep on finding hate mail in the pockets of my coat." And I love that line because it's such a great description on how relentless, negativity can be sometimes. I'm excited to see them. So we got 10 minutes left. What's next?
What is next? I'm trying to figure out what to do with my new computer, honestly, because I don't have too much on here. I'm not sure I'm going to make it into a full music machine, but I figured I should ask you guys, if you had a new computer that you wanted to use specifically to play with sound and music, not necessarily as your go-to work machine, because you've got a go-to work machine, but if you had, a new fun toy of a computer, which is what my Microsoft Surface is. It's kind of a computer, but it's also a toy, something to have fun with. What would you put on there to have fun with sound?
You go first, Mike.
Actually, given that what you've got is a Surface 3, am I right?
Yes.
I'm really interested, and we've talked about this on Twitter and elsewhere, on what your impression is on the new notation software that's coming out that avails itself of the stylus and a large screen of the Surface. And if they do a good job with that, I might be swayed to get one of those things, because that's kind of been the old school composer's dream, is to be able to just pick up a stylus on the screen and start drawing into Sibelius or Finale.
So I haven't tried Sibelius or Finale because it's the last time I used Sibelius was back when I was in college, and after that I really didn't have a need for full notation. So just did stuff in the DAW. But I have been playing around with StaffPad, and StaffPad is kind of cool. It's not really Sibelius or Finale. It's actually much more like a front end to something like Sibelius or Finale. And the idea is you've got this program, and you can pretty quickly use your pen to sketch out notes. And it's not perfect. You do have a little bit of a system that you have to learn. It really wants you to write eighth notes in a certain way. It wants you to do your bar lines in a particular way, but it's not that far off. I've been actually practicing with it by, transcribing some popular music, and I think it's been pretty fun, and it's pretty quick, and it's a really lightweight program, and I haven't done super big orchestral scores, but I've done some cool ensembles with this thing, and it looks pretty good. And the next step for me is I'm going to have to try to export some music XML into something like Sibelius or Finale and see how that looks, if that is actually a really good workflow. But that seems to be what people are talking about right now, and I'm looking forward to keeping on exploring that route.
We mentioned Notion before. Do they have that for the computer you're using?
Yeah, actually, I've been exploring Notion, and it sounds like Notion is no longer an option for me with a Windows Surface.
Oh, okay.
Because apparently in Notion 5, computers that have both touch and pen. So the Surface indeed has both touch and a pen, and apparently it just messes up with the input. And it sounds like the company is really not caring to fix those issues, which is too bad, because it sounds like the support for pen was actually pretty decent in Notion 4, but there's no way for me to get that. I've got Muse Score on here right now, which some of you guys might know about. It's the open source community project, which is actually a pretty full-featured scoring program. It's not quite as elegant as Sibelius or Finale. Certainly, my memories of Sibelius 5 back in the day are rather much more streamlined than my fighting with Muse Score at the moment. But it still seems to work okay. Now, this certainly for scoring, it seems like the Surface is pretty good, but I need to experiment more with this workflow.
I would hate to have to buy a Microsoft product, because I swore I would stop doing that in the 2000s. But if they are the only company offering a large screen stylus-based platform, and that's where the handwriting, you call it manuscript recognition software, ends up being, I might just have to check it out. And I find myself hoping that the rumors of a large screen iPad turn out to be true.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how Sibelius will be with the next release. They're touting the pen features on there, but we'll find out shortly.
How is the
actually?
Please go ahead.
Actually, Mike, did you ever consider getting something like a mod book?
Don't know what that is.
Oh, so there are Modbook is one of these companies. They will actually modify a MacBook Pro and put a Wacom digitizer in it.
Oh, like
and optionally take out the keyboard as well, or at least permanently fix it to the back. And you have your Wacom stylus-based Mac experience.
I think it's an interesting idea, but unless there's software applications that support that sort of thing, it's mostly a curiosity or a garage-type project.
Yeah.
How do you know all this
I always
stuff, man,
want
to
one.
get your job done? I can't keep up with these things, you know.
Oh man, it just sort of filters through my brain osmosis. I don't really actively look for all this information, but I try my best to just remember the little bits and pieces that I get. Yeah.
Gotcha. So don't upgrade to Notion 5, you're saying? Keep it at Notion 4?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been at Notion 5 for a while, and people have been complaining about Notion 5 support for computers with both pen and touch. So it just sounds really frustrating. Too bad, because I like Presonus. I think they're a good company, and I like their stuff.
I did check out Notion briefly because I really liked one of their selling points, which was the easy integration of the MIDI meaning of the notation and playback. So whereas in Sibelius you have a limited ability to kind of program playback, and if you have a lot of patience, you can learn their sound set language and kind of wire it to your DAW so that when you put your string note, it switches to the appropriate sample articulation. But Notion was supposed to be better integrated in that respect. It was supposed to have a baked-in sound set that was very responsive to all the notation. It might have primarily been orchestral, but maybe it had band instruments and other things like that.
Yeah.
When I love the idea a lot, and if any notation software really nails it, I will flock to them and not look back. My impression was that the built-in library in Notion was not that super. It was kind of adequate if you wanted a first-order kind of imagination of what your music sounds like, but it wasn't suitable for production. At least that was my impression.
I thought it was LSO in there.
It may well be, but you know the programming of a virtual instrument is more important than the sound source.
I totally know what you mean. I was just mentioning that I was surprised that it came from the London Symphony Orchestra.
How have you
to boot up my iPad
tried Note Performer for Sibelius? Sorry about that. Have you tried Note Performer for Sibelius? Because that's supposed to be another one of these playback engines on top that's supposed to help with getting your Sibelius score actually in a production-ready type state.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so I remember a few weeks ago you were asking about what's up with Wallander Instruments. And it does seem like in terms of the actual instruments they put out, they've kind of been by the wayside. They haven't really updated a lot, but they've got this thing called a Note Performer, which is basically a program that's specifically for Sibelius, specifically for improving the quality of the performance of Sibelius scores. So I thought that might be something worth checking out. They've got some interesting demos there.
It's a third-party kind of a plug-in or a layer on top of Sibelius?
Yes. That is something that they've actually been updating, unlike their instrument plugins. This thing they have been updating pretty regularly. It looks like it looks like they just put out an update for Note Performer in March of this year. So they're doing stuff here.
So it looks like my Notion is version 1.3.107. Apparently I haven't used it in a while.
Oh, wow.
Nor have I let it update, which is, I guess, smart. Which is a danger, right, with iPad software, that sometimes it'll auto-update. I don't know if you guys turned it off, but I turned off auto-updates.
Well, that is clear.
Yeah. Oh, you're quick. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
There's another one on here, though, on my iPad called Notate Me. Have you guys used that?
I haven't used that one.
Kind of looks like that.
Oh, geez. Oh, wait, I actually remember that icon, yeah. I think I messed with that before.
Yeah, you can scroll in your information. I don't know how good it is, but I put them both on here with the intention of checking them out.
I do remember when that came out, and it generated some buzz, but I think the limitation is the screen size of the iPad, and it ends up it's kind of like a micro window on your score. It's not really useful for heavy duty stuff.
Yeah. It's also very jittery on an iPad 2. I think it's about time for me to upgrade.
Yeah, the iPad 2 is definitely kind of old. I mean, it depends on what you're working with. I still use an iPad 2 for all of my MIDI apps, but that's all you're doing, MIDI. Not a whole lot of bandwidth or processing power required for that.
Yeah, that's so true. There was a thought I had. Oh, I wanted to ask, and I didn't want to forget. So, Vince, are you getting any audio latency on your new Surface?
I haven't actually tried out anything that required audio drivers yet.
Okay, I guess you mentioned that earlier. I was just curious.
Yeah, all the stuff that I've got on here, I've tried the built-in input. The built-in input mic is actually okay. Right now I'm actually recording with this Blue Yeti, which is, pretty solid, but again, it doesn't really require any specialized drivers. And actually, all my sound cards right now, my go-to sound card is FireWire. And I know the world has already gone past FireWire and doing USB 3, but I love these FireWire sound devices that I've got. Man. Yeah, I don't know what to do about this right now. I guess I'm eventually going to have to get a USB 3 device for this Surface if I want to try professional stuff.
No, I'm with you. I'm FireWire 800 all over this place, and I'm afraid to upgrade anything because I don't want to have to lose it.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing because, obviously we have our audio needs. They're really important. But in terms of the throughput that's actually required, FireWire and USB 2.0 should be more than enough for all that stuff. I can't imagine an audio situation where I would need the full throughput of Thunderbolt. I just cannot, not in my wildest dreams. CPU, important. Memory, important. But the actual protocol that's used for getting stuff out of your sound interface and into your computer, I like my FireWire. It seems to be good.
Me too. I agree with you completely. Well, we always do. Right at the end of the show, did my mic just...
Yes, it did just cut off.
It totally did it without me touching it. I just got a Google thing that said, we don't like the way you talk, so we shut you up. It was very strange. Anyway, I just realized that I did get a piece of hardware that we should probably discuss next week, but it's kind of good that it'll be next week because it'll give me time to dig in. But I just finally received my guitar wing. Have you guys heard of Guitar Wing by Livid Instruments?
No.
I'll send a link in the chat. It's it basically hooks onto your guitar and through Bluetooth attaches to your software. And right now I'm using it with Guitar Rig. So I run my guitar into Guitar Rig to make guitar sounds, and then I use this device as a controller to mess with all kinds of knob turning. I do that in real time with a Moog MP201 attached to my Mogerfoger so that I can mess with all kinds of knobs using my feet rather than having to reach up and take my hands off the guitar. But the Guitar Wing offers a lot more, a wider palette of options for controlling things. So what I'm going to do is run my guitar, as I often do actually. When I'm doing orchestral stuff, I'll do stuff on the guitar because I'm not a pianist. But I run it through my Yamaha G50 guitar MIDI converter into orchestral software so that I can play these big chords. I'm then going to use the Guitar Wing to start messing with some of the things that I can mess with in orchestral software and see if I can come up with some new ideas.
Okay. Well,
I will experiment during the next week, and I will put a link here in the chat to Guitar Wing in case anybody's checking it out. It was a Kickstarted thing, and now you can find it at your local Guitar Center. With that said, I guess we should say goodbye. We miss Alex. He keeps us moving, doesn't he? And he also keeps me from being a grump, so I'm happy for that. Hey guys, it's great seeing you. I'll see you next week, and Hey, have a good week in the meantime. Thanks, chatties.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah. Wait a minute. Please
Whoa.
follow us on Twitter. Please like us on Facebook. Alex would be all over me right now in the chat room for not mentioning these things. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and thumb us up on YouTube or something like that, and tell all your friends. And we've actually had quite a lot of turnover, so I really appreciate everybody doing that. I make fun of it every week because I'm a Luddite, but thank you very much for what you're doing because we're getting a lot of attention, and I really appreciate it. And I know the other guys do too.
Ooh.
All right, bye.